We have also seen some people testing out White Frost on ladder. Still seems a little bit not quite where you want to be. And a big problem with that, of course, is you're kind of forced to go Devotion and you just miss out on those control tools. So, but the first game is underway, Christo. The microphones are working and the games are ready to begin. We have Shaggy versus Wlastelin looking for a place in Gwent Open number 4.
Wlastelin making a liar out of me, saying that, hey, this Reckless Flurry probably would go on red, and just decides, hey, we're going to jam this on blue instead, because why the heck not? And Shaggy going with that imprisonment list. Probably not going to have a ton of lock targets given what Wlastelin is playing here, but that's going to come down to any type of engines. I mean, we see the Hunter in hand, things like that. The beauty of having open deck list is Shaggy can go in, look at that list, and pick out exactly what he wants to block. But a quick look through, there aren't much in the way of engines there other than maybe Coral and that one Hunter that we see.
And we do find ourselves in a laboratory. One of my favorite journeys, and I have to say actually it's my favorite journey, in that we have the different boards. Board's probably my favorite little vanity. And this board, there's a few spooky things you can do. Let's see if either of the players do end up clicking on the skeleton here and see if we see the skeleton moving. That could be something to keep your eye on. There's also a nice little creature in the bottom left on the table. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but you might just see it with the red eye there. And Wlastelin going with Shoop versus Shaggy with Siri. So lots of interesting. The card back's maybe not as interesting, but I like to see some vanities. Shaggy coming out with a nice card back as well.
I'm a big fan of that Shoop skin. I love the fact that, you know, he celebrates the holidays with us. He's got his little Valentine's Day you know, wings going on, or he's got, in this case, his St. Patrick's Day hat. He's all set. I love that Shoop comes out to celebrate the holidays with us.
Troll's definitely my favorite creature in The Witcher 3 as well. They always do give me a chuckle as well, so great to see. I know he's got some voice lines reminiscent of Bart, and this game has started off, and lots of these decks have quite a lot of thinning potential in their opening hands, with Sunset Wanderers Scowled. Also, the Mask of Ouroboros is going to be thinning for Wlastelin, and Shaggy also has access to Furcar as well as this Dead Man's Tongue. So lots of thinning available for both players, and that's a big difference, I think, in Gwent from now compared to a few months ago, where actually a lot of these players are able to cycle through their decks, and that means they should be able to have a lot more consistency in their decks and not be quite as reliant on draws, of course, that can happen. Shaggy not really committing too much as we begin here with a couple of slower plays, but still doing Nilfgaard things and just playing Skellige cards.
And that was one of the biggest challenges in playing Nilfgaard is, you know, going Devotion, you didn't necessarily have a ton of thinning potential in the past. You had your Roderick as a tutor, you could coup it and get it twice, but otherwise you were somewhat limited. Now you've got your Blightmakers that go pull your Mage Assassins. They don't only thin, but they drop a ton of points on the board. And then you have things like Dead Man's Tongue that goes, thins, and again, puts a ton of points on the board. So Nilfgaard definitely in a better situation than they've been in the past, in the way of just thinning, making sure you're finding your gold cards. Not that Shaggy has had any issue. If you look at that hand, it is a thing of beauty, finding just about everything that that Shaggy would possibly want in this round one.
And here does come the Dead Man's Tongue. Of course, he's going to be thinning his deck by 2 cards. Boosting by 8 suggests that he does, in fact, banish 2 of his 4 Provision Bronze cards. No surprises there. Getting rid of the weakest cards on paper, leaving the better cards remaining in his deck. And Wlastelin making full use of this Raging Bear, which got buffed a couple of months ago. And this just shows what a difference just small buffs here and there can have on the meta. As this Raging Bear, just a nice 8-point card that you can play down early, giving those Megascopes early value. We saw before people running Great Swords. Well, okay, this isn't quite a Great Sword, but it's a provision cheaper. If you're including 2, that's going to be 2 provisions cheaper, and you don't require leader charges as well. So a nice card to use round 1.
Well, especially with the addition of Megascope, right? Being able to copy that thing, in this case, twice. Unfortunately, no Barification in hand. I'm a little bit upset. Wish we would have been able to see that go through and pop one of those Megascopes into a 10-point play. But Shaggy saying all of those bears are just a little bit too much for me. You know, Shaggy went ahead, did some thinning, and pretty much like you said, Speci played some low committal things and just passes after 3. Says, I'm going to take my handful of gold cards that I probably don't want to play this round, and we're going to go into round 2 with them.
Yeah, this line from Shaggy is something that reminds me very much of Red Rain. Something that I've heard people in the past call the Red Rain line with Nilfgaard, where you just, if you're If you're going second, you play 3 cards and you pass, because what that does is it puts the pressure and the ball in your opponent's court. They say, look, if you want to go to a long round, you can, because I'm Nilfgaard. I got a lot of points, but equally, if you try and bleed me, I'm just going to try and overtake you and then have card advantage for round 3. Of course, if you're going first, you can't really pass until you hit that 6 card mark. Yeah, Wlastelin not being able to pass on 6 because Shaggy just beats him to the pass. And Wlastelin starting with that totem, already committing into this round. And yeah, Shaggy is exactly where he wants to be, with lots of powerful assimilate cards in hand.
And I think you hit the nail on the head there, especially where Wlastelin knows, hey, I've got to play into this round pretty heavily because I don't want Nilfgaard to have a nice full round 3. So we're going to go and commit something like Totem. That becomes the other challenge as well, is that this Reckless Flurry deck does have a little bit of a limited option in the way of proactive plays. So something like the Totem is an option. Otherwise, what else do we have here? I guess you could have gone Coral or the Scald to be able to draw you an extra card. Take a look, discard that Skirmisher and get some points on the board. But in this case, you know, the best way to just go and, let's say, commit right away is getting that Totem going. Going to see an Experimental Remedy come out, and those 8-point bears are just potentially going to be a liability. In this case, the Informant's going to block the Totem instead, and it's a smart heads-up play by Shaggy, just getting in the way there and making that Totem just a little bit worse.
Yeah, this timing from Wlastelin to play the Totem straight away. Of course, okay, it was his best proactive option, but it is a card that gets worse over time against Nilfgaard. Imagine this Informant had come down to block the Totem when Shaggy had Brathan's Vigo on the board already, right? And also just better targets to copy, right? So Wlastelin making the decision to play the Totem early, nullifying the power of this Informant, but Shaggy still deciding it's worth going for.
And that's actually a great point as well, especially I hadn't thought about the fact that making that copy, you want to use things like Informant and Remedy and things like that once you have, you know, at least 1 or 2 Assimilate engines on the board. We see 4 currently in hand, with Shaggy having Arto Brathan's Vigo and the Mage over there, whose name escapes me at this moment, but you've got the Assimilate on board or in hand. You just haven't had time to establish it, and that's where, you know, we were talking about before why you don't want to give Nilfgaard that long round 3, because you don't want them to have 3 or 4 Assimilate engines on board in every single card they play, essentially going ahead and adding 4 points to that. So here comes Shaggy with some of that thinning we were talking about before and jamming points on the board, but Wlastelin now has to make a decision, because that Sunset Wanderers is about to walk off of that cliff.
Yeah, and this is another thing that Sunset Wanderers gives you. We talked about sort of being forced Wlastelin to push into this round 2. Well, this extra 9 points of tempo that Wlastelin has is really going to help him make a lot more efficient trades. And Sunset Wanderers, even at 13 provisions, still finding its place in certain decks. We know how strong the 4 provision cards are for Wlastelin in this deck, with things like the Megascopes, things like the Skirmishers and the Scouts. So why not have this high power, high cost card that's going to add that little bit of tempo when you're forced to bleed?
Well, especially in a situation like this, you know, playing Gerd for a good amount of value and then dropping your Wanderers makes an absolute huge difference here. There goes Yenvo deciding that, hey, that Gerd's got to go. So, you know, feels like playing Yenvo at that point is mainly just for points. Yep. Not that, you know, Gerd is not going to have value on Shaggy's side, but not necessarily a critical piece that's being yoinked. Not something like a Junod or something like a Geralt that can go ahead and, you know, potentially play for even more on the back end. So Wlastelin taking the pass, saying, hey, I'm going to keep that card, even though it's going to be a pretty long round 3 where Shaggy's going to have just about all of his tools still in hand, full leader ability on both sides. It's going to be a heck of a back and forth in this long round 3.
And Shaggy's Furcat drawing his Joachim, meaning that this Gerd can just come straight out, putting the Joachim into the row of Gerd, and that is going to be enough points while maintaining all of his Assimilate cards. Now, he isn't playing the location, if I'm not mistaken, so no more Joachim, but correct, holding on to the Brathans, the Vigo, the Terra Nova, as well as these Mage Infiltrators, as I do believe they're called, Mage Torturers. Not bad at all for Shaggy.
And that's a big part of it as well. You know, somebody looking at that might say, is there a better way for me to get out of this round than playing Joachim? And in this case, ironically, Joachim would have pulled or did pull Gerd, which would have activated the assimilate engines. But in reality, that's not what Shaggy's deck is all about. It's about getting the assimilate engines on the board. It's about playing things like Remedy and Diplomacy and things of that nature, the bribery, to go ahead again and boost those engines. So Shaggy probably feels pretty good about the situation that he's in, knowing that I have the opportunity here to, you know, go ahead and establish those engines. And that's exactly what he's going to do on a proactive side of things. Just drop the mage out here and say, all right, let's get this ball rolling.
We talked earlier as well about how consistent these decks can be if you find your thinning cards in round one. Well, both players, just 4 cards left in their deck at this stage in the game. Coral combining with the leader charge to clean up that assimilator engine. There is one more Mage Torturer available for Shaggy, and remember, whatever he gives Spying is then going to be able to be replayed by Terra Nova. So Coral, not a bad option. It's going to play for 8 points, but also thin your deck. But instead, Shaggy deciding to take that lock, setting up the coup potential on the Coral. This is what I like to call the payable special, Christo, where you use that imprisonment leader charge combined with coup de grace. Of course, it's honestly not as important anymore when you've got a spying status on it, and that's one thing that's great about this Mage Torturer. We've seen this card never really seeing any play. It was introduced at the same time as Brathan's, I believe, in the Master Mirror expansion. It could have been Way of the Witcher, but I think it was Master Mirror. Just never really seen play until the introduction of Terra Nova, and it certainly does benefit from that. And that does mean Terra Nova is going to be playing a Coral, and there's also a Coral potentially available from Coup de Grace as well. So could see a couple of Corals here, thinning the deck even further for Shaggy.
Exactly. And I don't know exactly what is left in Shaggy's list. I'm trying to go dig it up to see if anything really has been missed. I don't see the Vincent in hand. I think that is about it. Every other gold looks like it is present here. So there isn't a lot for Shaggy to dig for, but I think, you know, just getting that one extra draw off of Coral might be a nice opportunity to go in and see what they can find. Getting the discard going anyway on Wlastelin's side, I don't know that he's particularly happy with what he found, but wants nothing to do with any assimilate engines. He's just using those leader charges to remove them completely, and Shaggy is starting fresh with 7 cards left in hand.
Yeah, double leader charge does clean up the assimilator engine, but there is a problem for Wlastelin, and that is this Junod in hand. He is going to need to still set that up later down the line. Here does come Terra Nova, instantly clicking the Coral as well, not waiting around. Decision to be made over what card is discarded. The drawing of the Blightmaker as well does mean that Shaggy can put any card he wants on top of his deck if he does want to take that coup onto another Coral and guarantee that he draws it. But not sure if there's any Mage Assassins left in the deck. We don't have access to Observer Mode during these qualifiers due to the delay on the stream where we are live. We can see you lovely people in the chat, but just a heads up that we cannot see the decks either, so we're sort of a little bit in the dark there, but as we work our way through this, I'm sure we can see how it goes. And
there should be a Mage Assassin left. I believe we've only seen one because Shaggy doesn't have a way to trigger it other than oh, there we go. We're gonna take a look and see. So you've got the Blightmaker, gonna go ahead and I assume pull the Assassin. There we go. Though we saw in deck, we've got Vincent, we've got Amnesty. I mean, both of those cards do have some sort of value, but based on what Shaggy has in hand, I don't think it's necessarily something that he's going to want to go do. I think what he has left in hand is superior in most ways. Having a couple of assimilate engines, having a couple assimilate triggers as well, going to give you some fun options.
yeah, and even though he doesn't have any Mage Torturers available to give spying statuses, he does still have that trusty imprisonment lock, which he can combine with Coup de Grace. And on Junod, that can be devastating on something like a Bear Witcher. I would expect, however, Wlastelin to try and play around that by playing his Junod last, because that is often the best coup target for a Nilfgaard player in this mirror matchup. Not in this mirror matchup, in this particular matchup. Quen as well is still in the hand for Wlastelin. We did see him clicking Coral, so there was maybe a chance to brick the Quen if it is not done so already. But there does come Wlastelin with his Axie, removing the spying status from Coral, as well as unlocking it. No discards available, but resetting as well for 8 points, as well as that little bit of armor, which can be used in combination with the Raging Bear here.
I think as time goes on, you look at what Shaggy's doing, and as Wlastelin, you say, you know what? There isn't an assimilate engine on board. I'm sure there's a couple left. They're not going to get that big. So resetting by 3, like you said, getting that armor out as well for the bear is going to be very beneficial versus Shaggy's side of things where, yeah, you know, Vigo Brathens may end up adding 2, 3, 4 points, but that reset for 3 on Coral is completely acceptable, I think, here, and is a good play. Unfortunately, no bronze cards on board, so Brathens does just have to go for the big boost. And now you say, well, maybe that Gwent would have been better saved.
Yeah, and it's really interesting from Wlastelin that that's a conscious decision, as you say. No ability for Shaggy here to use the informant, which is going to trigger more assimilate. It's going to be more points. Holding on to these bronzes and continues to do so by taking the heat wave. Shaggy nullified the potential power of the heat wave by buffing his lowest unit, so it was a 9-point heat wave. But again, just denying those assimilate engines, those informants getting their value. So Shaggy has a decision: does he go for his assimilate cards first, but not play an informant, or does he just play his assimilate triggers, things like the bribery, things like the novice here?
And that's exactly it. And you know, going back to that, like you said, conscious decision of Wlastelin not playing any bronze cards to copy, because you do have things like Remedy, for example, that can go and potentially get another informant, things like that. So there is a potential to trigger those assimilate engines even more so. And just it comes down to those little nuanced plays, those little things that, you know, most players don't think about. I'll put myself out there and say I often don't think about that. But here we go. Here is grabbing a Blight Maker. I don't know if that was the best choice. I didn't catch all of the options.
Yeah.
We're going Cow Carcass here.
And this is yet again Wlastelin's decision to hold on to these bronze cards for as long as possible, proving to be huge worth, because this Vigo showed a Blight Maker, it showed a Mage Assassin, and it didn't show an Emissary. It in fact showed an Informant. So this would have been a mini Brathens, a second Brathens essentially, for a couple of provisions less, a couple points less. No option for Shaggy to do that though, because Wlastelin has masterfully played around these Informants, and Shaggy takes the Blight Maker. No mages available in the deck, but there was the special Amnesty, which is now on top. And the reason he goes for the Rock Tosser, or the Cow Carcass, okay, not going to be able to trigger the poisons, but it does trigger his Assimilate a couple of times.
And then doing that 2 damage to the 1-point unit. Technically, you lose a point, but hey, let's not take that risk. Yeah. Let us not risk the fact that maybe that poison comes back somehow. So just cleans that up ever so nicely and just stays ahead by a couple of points here. So nothing huge, but you mentioned it before. The lack of leader charge plus Junod means that Bear Witcher needs to connect and needs to do some proper damage. Otherwise, Junod is picking off that 1 point, that 1-point Blight Maker, which does not feel particularly great here.
And here does come the coup on the Hjalmar, triggering those 2 Assimilate cards again. Shaggy 13 points ahead as it stands. Now, I do wonder this decision, as you mentioned, the Raging Bear to kill the Rot Tosser, if that was necessary. Was there any potential follow-up poisons? Or was Wlastelin maybe better suited to hit the armor? I suppose this Rot Tosser was just going to disappear anyway, so while it looks like it was -1 points, in fact, it wasn't, right? And why not just keep that armor for a rainy day? So, in fact, Wlastelin beating us both to pi. I was like, is that really correct? But yeah, this Rot Tosser was basically 0 points because it was going to be removed. So there was no real difference in what Wlastelin did. Why not save the armor, right? You never know when some armor could come in handy.
Exactly. You're not really losing anything, something that's going to go away anyway. There's that Bear Witcher doing the damage like we mentioned before. Junod's going to be able to come down and finish that off, but Junod playing for 9 is not exactly that big swing that you're typically hoping for. Though, you know, Nilfgaard's pretty high up in the way of boosting cards, and there's Gerd, there's a bear. There's a few things on board here that will go ahead and trigger those Assimilate engines.
Yep. Looking for the Junod again. Used the leader charge to damage down the Bear Witcher, I believe it was, that was played through Quen, because of course it wasn't damaged. It came in at 8 points. Shaggy hedged his bets and tried and hoped that he might be able to find the Junod from the bribery. It didn't happen, and the Raging Bear a lot less points at just 7 points. Junod would have been 11, so 4 points difference there. I guess there was worse options for Shaggy. It's a 12-point game. In comes the Bear Witcher. It's 1 card apiece. 4 points in it, but it's a bronze versus a gold.
And that Junod's going to get that value on the bear now, going to be playing for 11 points. That is a big, big difference. And yeah, that Remedy feels kind of okay, except you already removed the bear on the other side of the board, so you cannot copy it. You can just play your own if that's the option that you want to go. But it does seem like the most points out of what we have left here.
Yeah, there are some assimilate cards on board with Brathens and Vigo. I think Terra Nova was removed. So, but not going for the Bear Witcher and instead going for the Raging Bear, damaging down his own Raging Bear even further. And I think what Shaggy's done here is he's just played round Junod. He says Junod is the last card. If I take this play, I beat Junod 100% of the time. But I can't believe how close that was. I think Wlastelin played incredibly well, and Shaggy just came through and grafted that result out by just 3 points. What an exciting opening game we had here.
And keeping in mind that that Blight Maker is a bronze card, so for 6 provisions or 6 points with something like Dead Man's Tongue, it still gives you the opportunity to go ahead and get a second bronze card as well. So you can easily boost by, let's say 10 points off of a Dead Man's Tongue. You have the opportunity to pull it with Courier. You can do a whole heck of a lot of work through something like that. So it gives you just, again, that flexibility and that ability to go get kind of whatever it is you need as time goes on. And yeah, you don't want that Blightmaker at the bottom of your deck. So maybe that Assassin goes and gets pulled by the Courier, and then the Blightmaker can be pulled by Joachim, can go ahead and do what we saw Shaggy do last game, where he went and dropped one of the cow carcasses, and that does proc assimilate. So again, just gives you all of those tools to have that flexibility when you're using that list.
Yeah, absolutely. And here we are with Scoia'tael, which is Shaggy here, already ahead, versus Syndicate. And Shaggy here opening up with a Dunker on the board. And just putting his TA on it. Why not? 9-point Duncan. And look, 9 points is a risky number to be on against Syndicate because of the very scary Horson, but this one little bit of armor is going to make all the difference here, because Horson not able to clean this up in one swoop, as the damage is going to put it down to 6, and then of course he's not able to remove a 4 strength card.
Exactly, and you know what? Coming back with line pockets on red here for Wlastelin, I think that there is, based on the hand that he's holding right now, it actually doesn't feel quite as good. I was going to say otherwise, there's an opportunity here to really go and push hard on red to try and go ahead and get ahead here and maybe even win this on even. The hand doesn't feel great. Lots of crimes going on, but not a whole heck of a lot of points to have. And even feeling bad trying to play proactively here, since you can't poison Dunka. So what exactly do you do in this situation?
Yeah, well, what do you do? Well, Wlastelin decides, I'm going to poison Duncan now. Look, we could say that he didn't realize there was a veil on there. Look, that could be possible. However, I think Wlastelin has played against Duncan enough times to know that she does in fact have a veil, and this was just a way of developing some coins in his bank. And then you can see the bloody good fun does come down. And now look, Horson would be able to clean up this Duncan, stop the carryover, but Maxi is still going to be enough for Shaggy to stay ahead here. So just to confirm, there's like a slight glitch I think in the client here. We have got Shaggy on the bottom as Scoia'tael, and we do have on the top Wlastelin as Syndicate. I was feeling like something was a little bit off about this game I was watching, Chris, so I couldn't quite work out what it was, and that is it. So we do have Shaggy on the bottom here, just to be very clear there.
So I was a moment or two behind on that last call, because I was trying to open the second link that we have, which does have the leaders, but seems to be lagging behind just slightly momentarily. So we'll keep you abreast of the situation as these leader charges get used, but you do have Precision Strike for Shaggy on the bottom, lined pockets for Wlastelin on top. The big challenge here is actually we're not going to see the coin counter, so I'll be keeping an eye on that for us to try and to make sure that we are fully aware of the situation and the different plays that can come down from Wlastelin's side.
What we'll do, we'll play out round 1 on this stream, and then we'll switch over to the other stream if that has the leader charges. That seems like a good plan, a good time to switch in between rounds. We'll just switch over to that one. That's why we've got to, just in case anything like this happens. But apologies for that. And yeah, Dunk is still alive, getting that carryover. This is a pretty nice looking Whisperer in at 6 points. If one more buff can be put onto her, that's going to make Horson a little bit more difficult to deal with her. But of course, look, Syndicate has a Tunnel Drill. It has Freak Show as well as Horson. There's all sorts of ways of dealing with these things here.
And they're all in hand on top of that. So Wlastelin's going to have no limited options in the way of doing some removal. We also see 2 poisons in hand. There is a lot to do. We're going to see the Freak Show come out. go get a whole bunch of coins by killing the bounty, refilling the pockets here, and then gonna go to work on Dunka, putting Dunka at that magical 6 number that will make Horsun an easy removal should we get to that point.
Yep, and there was obviously the option there to spend more leader charges to try and remove Dunker, but it would have been a huge investment, and the decision was not to do that. And here does come Horsun, and this does mean that Wlastelin is in fact now ahead. No passing opportunities here for Shaggy, but he did get a lot of carryover, and he does have a leader available. Now, look, you want to keep your leader for round 3 if at all possible, but at least with Precision Strike, you are going to be thinning your deck a little bit. So, you know, getting rid of those 2 bronze cards is going to increase the odds of you drawing your golds.
And that's it. I want to say that with this list, there's enough opportunity to generate points through Gourd, through your Feigned Death, things of that nature, so you don't quite feel as bad burning your leader in, let's say, round 1 or round 2, because it does thin. It does give you the ability to avoid some of those bricks, and bricking is a real challenge here, because you also have Simulus in hand, who does pull 2 copies of, theoretically in this case, let's say orbs. So you're trying to avoid your orbs, you're trying to avoid your sentinels. Playing your leader a little bit earlier is maybe not the worst thing in the world.
And this is one large Whisperer. I'm just grateful and thankful that the other Whisperers she might summon are not also going to come out at 7 strength, because that would be quite ridiculous. They are still going to be coming in at 3. And Wlastelin here, continuing to apply pressure, continuing to try and get ahead, isn't going to remove this, but does go for his Novigradian Justice. Furco thinning the Justice, and then Justice thinning a Bronze Spender as well. And this is able to damage down. Of course, you wouldn't be able to bleed this, but you can damage it down. And Horsun as well being used. Shaggy as well is just popping off now. He just slams his leader to say thinning his Sentinels. And here come the orbs for that little bit of carryover as well. That was a quite quick turn of events, Christo. Hard to keep up with.
There was absolutely no other option there. It was the decision between, do I just give this up on even, or do I go ahead and get the ball rolling with, no pun intended, but my orbs, and getting the orbs out there, getting Simulus going. The only way to put bodies on the board is to jam leader. And now, if you're looking at it and you're on Wlastelin's side, what do you do here? Do you decide that, hey, this is okay, I can drop Drill, I can't use Graydon? Do I set up a poison on maybe one of the 6s? It's a bit slow, and that would give Shaggy a pass. You know, what do you do in this situation? Because you've committed so hard to try and get ahead and win this on even that it feels bad now to stop.
And here does come the drill. He has the Crown Splitter Sandwich ready to go. Some leader charges come in for Shaggy, for Wlastelin, I beg your pardon. And he just uses enough to make sure that he's ahead. And now Shaggy is in an awkward spot, but the drill is gone. And that is going to be making him feel very good. Getting rid of Horsun's Freak Show, getting rid of the drill, and getting rid of Horsun himself as well. We talked about all 3 of those cards, and there's so much, it feels like it's never ending, but somehow Shaggy, okay, look, he lost on even while using his leader, but these 3 insane removal cards are all gone, and that does give him some hope moving forward into the rest of the game.
Absolutely, but what a round 1 where Shaggy spent full leader. Wlastelin is down to 1 leader charge left, so 1 coin. That was run and gun, you know, dropping Justice, dropping Freak Show, dropping Junior, dropping Drill, almost your entire leader, you know, charges. That was huge. And on the other side, the advantage I think Shaggy has is Shaggy didn't really use a lot of those kind of win conditions. We saw Simulus come down, get the orbs going, but we see a lot of those elves in hand that still do benefit from the special cards being played, the special cards being copied, things of that nature that are going to get them, get Gourd up to that point of being a big, thick body to drop at the end of the game. And if you play that, even if you don't have last say, you've just got to avoid giving your opponent double last say, because something like a bounty plus a Graydon is going to be problematic for you.
Absolutely, and this is historically a very, very tough matchup for Scoia'tael, and the main reason is those 3 cards we saw in round 1. There's also things like Dip in the Ponta, and as you mentioned, this double last say definitely going to be a really nice option to have for Wlastelin with the Bounty plus Graden. But for Shaggy, look, he is relying on so many of his cards sticking for his points. He's got an Alza, for example. He needs these sorcerers to be stuck on the board in order for his Alza to go through, because otherwise his Alza would also die. So while Shaggy lost on even, and he can't be too happy about that, and he uses leader, at least there's a chance that his engines will be sticking in the rest of this game.
That's actually a really great point. I completely forgot Alzer was a thing in this list, but the ability is there to go get the Alzer. Yeah, that dip in the Pontar is not fun here, but you can go get the Alzer. It's still going to pull the orbs from the grave, which is what you want, to go and pop out potentially a ton of points. I wonder at one point you commit Feign Death if you're on Shaggy's side. You want to get that down early because you only have 2 elves technically left in hand. But do you want to consider maybe keeping that for a short round 3? I'm curious to see how this plays out. I'm wondering how much Wlastelin bleeds here versus, the scenario where maybe he just looked at a dry pass otherwise.
Yeah, and I think Wlastelin is very consciously staying ahead of this Feign Death. The Feign Death is going to come down now, and it's just going to be this commander up at 5 points. What that does mean is Wlastelin has now just traded this 2 bronze cards, the Spender as well as the Dip, for a Feign Death if he chooses that now is the time to pass.
Feel like it has to be. I think that looking at your hand, you can go get coins if you want to with Siggy, and then you can, use some of that to spend maybe with the blacksmith, but it doesn't feel ideal in this case. You still do have the Witchfinder as well as Graydon to get you the ability to answer something pretty tall, but we're going to continue to see this bleed go down. Siggy's going to come fill up the pockets, it looks like. Thinking based on the hovering. There we go. There we go.
There is Siggy down. Now we know there's full coins. There's no doubt about that one. So full coins available. And still 2 elves in hand, but as well as this Royal Decree. Now, Royal Decree often is in this deck to pull the Alza, because you want really to use your Neuromancy with Alza on the board. So going a Neuromancy for Alza can feel really sad, because there's so many great options off a Neuromancy, including She Who Knows, for example. So lots of people including Royal Decree. Some people also going for Alza's Double Cross, which is, that makes a lot of sense, using Alza's Double Cross to pull Alza, but it is Royal Decree available. And still spending coming down for Wlastelin, emptying that bank, has another spender available. Also does have this little bit of combo with the bounty as well as the Graden with his Witchfinder as well.
And really just spending absolutely everything here, not caring about any of that carryover, and is going to be pushing, I imagine, for a short-ish round. But in this case, being able to drop another elf here is going to, that's actually a lot of math. So actually dropping the elf will not get Shaggy ahead. So that might be the situation that Wlastelin looks at taking a pass, unless Shaggy decides to go and use that Royal Decree for something, whether that is, Alzer or something else. But otherwise, I don't believe this gets.
Is there orbs in the graveyard still? The orbs in the graveyard, are they still floating around? So
they're not activated yet. That, I believe, is one. I think you need one more to be able to get those orbs off.
So Royal Decree maybe into an elf of some kind could have been an option, because that would have played 2 specials at once, right? And then you could use the orb on the Seer to get even more orbs in, and it could have been all crazy. But instead, Shaggy deciding that he doesn't actually want to commit that much, and he's happy to hold on here. But ultimately, he is going to have to probably use his Royal Decree to just thin out a bronze card here, as Wlastelin does take that pass, meaning he is going to have the double last save for round 3.
And not being able to check the graveyard, but I do believe that this Royal Decree is going to activate the orbs, which feels extra bad here. It does. Going to be able to copy 2 of them and put them back in the grave, which is nice, but can't feel good about spending all of these here. I wonder if he clicks and gets another orb. That is a possibility at 6 with that elf.
Would that play the other orbs? That would be the decision. Otherwise, I assume it must, right? Yes. It would cycle into the other orbs, otherwise that this sorceress would have been clicked. But this is a really interesting round. I wonder here if Shaggy could have had the option of going Royal Decree for an elf. Is it possible there's no other elves available? Here is a Neuromancy. Can he find the Alza in hand? Because that is what he's going to want. He's not going to want to go a Neuromancy for Alza, that's for sure.
But getting rid of that Rebuke feels pretty okay. I'm just going and looking and seeing in that Precision Strike list. I believe there was, it was an Elven Seer that was what Shaggy went to go get to make the extra copy of the orbs. So I definitely think that was a possibility to go trigger the orbs and stay ahead here. As you mentioned, there is Alzer, and that's not a half bad pull from Alzer.
That's really good.
having that be an order and expecting to see something like Cleaver, for example, come down, gonna feel real nice.
In fact, of all the locks, this is the only lock, I believe, with an order. I often diss Margarita, and I say, Margarita, you're just a bad Dora Grey. Because Dora Grey has that deploy lock, so against the red ships in Skellige, you can lock those instantly. He's just staying at 6, whereas Margarita drops down to 5. And I've never quite liked that about Margarita, but this is definitely where you prefer to have the Margarita. And look, you have to go a Neuromancy into Alza. You would love to have rolled the Creed into Alza, because then you could use your Anira to maybe pull a She Who Knows or a Draug, for example, which now has an order. But you still get that instant value from Alza. He's already played for 12 points plus a lock, which is quite ridiculous. The Pact as well, another card, another spell card, which is going to trigger this Alza. But he's been bountied up. That does mean that Graden is ready to remove him.
That's it. So you actually absolutely have to use that pact right here, knowing that Graydon's not going to survive. The question becomes, actually, you get full value with the orb as well. So that's pretty nice. And oh my gosh, rolling the greatsword, that feels pretty darn nice.
Wowza. I mean, look, okay, the 2-point slave driver, I do believe he's called, is not ideal, but getting a lock and getting a 10-point greatsword from these orbs, you cannot complain at all. There's also, of course, we mentioned earlier that Count Caldwell could have been a possibility. That's not quite Count Caldwell, but it's not too far off.
And I mean, Count Caldwell in this scenario would have probably felt pretty good with things like Gord existing, so that was always an option here. The question becomes, and you're a little bit stuck, right? Because that bounty is going to sit on Alzor. Removing him is still 10 points, so it feels pretty good. And you're going to imagine you have to do it, but you don't really have any coins in bank. There's 1 leader charge left. There's 3 coins on board. There's going to be that poison in hand. So you're going to have to decide, how am I going to use these coins? Is Philippa the best option? Well, right now, not really, because you're going to have a 6 and a bunch of 10s and 12s. Graydon plus a boost feels okay on Alzor. You're gonna want, and there's that poison coming down, you're gonna maybe want some coins for Cleaver as well. So Syndicate requires some math, and Wlastelin, being the level of play that I expect from him, is gonna be pretty high. So I'm sure he's doing the math in his head right now as to what is the optimal way to spend these coins.
24 points this Alza with a lock, which obviously has its own value. Gord does come down first. Now, this might look surprising because you could have had a 19-point Gord if you go for the Forest Protector first. But I think just trying to get a little bit of a better target, trying to clean up that Cleaver maybe, as that is going to be one of the best ways to spend coins and make sure that, you know, you don't end up with coins left in your bank. So I think that Shaggy here just trying to make things awkward for Wlastelin. Now, look, it is a huge gap in this game, but Graden, Philippa, Cleaver, not a bad hand at all, but all of these do rely on spending coins to maximize their value, and there aren't exactly enough coins to go around. Has Shaggy been able to mastermind this victory with his Alza and Gord short round 3?
I mean, you have to look at this now. If you're Wlastelin, you have to look at it and say, all right, Forest Protector has to be what's left. That's what they would hold on to. So maybe dropping that Cleaver doesn't feel as good. We're going to see Philippa come through. You know, the most efficient way theoretically to spend coins, but in this case, it still doesn't play for a huge amount. That Rebuke's only going to come down, do that 5 points of damage. That's 44 points with 2 cards left. And we're going to have to see if this is going to be enough. It doesn't feel like it's enough.
The Graden does have the option to spend as well, which means he's going to boost himself by the base power of Alza, which is going to be 6. So it's going to be a 9-point Graden.
And a 10-point swing.
The spending comes through, but it's just not enough. It's a 10-point game in favor of Shaggy. The Alza coming through, the Greatsword as well as the Margarita lock, putting in some serious work here. And Shaggy, despite losing round 1 on even Christo with using his leader, wins the game and is 2-0 up. This is the final stand for Wlastelin. He has to reverse sweep Shaggy Nuts and his Reckless Flurry deck. And we start off with a Reckless Flurry Mirror, Maddock versus no Maddock. So let's see, will Maddock come out on top on this one?
And I think the ability to use some of those bombs on Shaggy's side and stay uninteractive might make it a bit of a challenge for Wlastelin. He's going to have to play first, going to have to play proactively, and is then potentially going to have to deal with very few units on the other side of the board. Of course, not given Shaggy's current hand, where there is only one bomb present, and it's the red haze that you're probably saving for a little bit later on in the game. But again, you know, that red haze is going to be something that Wlastelin's going to have to keep an eye out for. You're going to have to play around. You're dropping a lot of big units like these bears. You're going to have to make sure you don't line them up next to each other for fear of that red haze coming down and doing a whole heck of a lot of damage.
Yep, Raging Bears for either player here, matched on the board. 8 points of proactivity. Shaggy, playing like I do whenever I play chess as the black player, I just copy what my opponent does so that I hope they are doing the correct thing. I played against Saber one time. We were about 20 turns in and then he went, wait, are you just copying me? I said, absolutely. I don't know what's going on.
20 turns in. That is commitment, sir. That is commitment.
I don't have a chance otherwise, right? Like, as soon as I got on white, I was very much exposed. So the Megascope comes down for more Raging Bears. And yeah, look at this. Shaggy is just, yeah, he knows what's up, man. He knows what's up.
Playing the Speci style of chess game, just matching card for card. And, you know, if we look at these hands, there's quite a bit of overlap. So we may see some... they're going to see that leader come down, get one of those skirmishers out on the board. So Wlastelin being able to put points out there, but Shaggy can definitely compete if he so chooses, having things like Burna, being able to drop some skirmishers as well. More bears come down, but again, Wlastelin heads up play, playing around that red haze and making sure they're not too close together. So we're also going to see how quickly each player's Sunset Wanderer kind of walks to the end of that earth and falls off and ends up on the board, because that can also be a pretty large swing. The Reckless Flurry that Shaggy is playing does have Morkvarg in it, does not have Quen. So we do see the Quen on Wlastelin's side, which would be theoretically the ideal answer for the Wanderers, and Morkvarg on the other side that would be answering it for Shaggy.
Yeah, the Axie, right? The Axie for the reset.
Sorry, the Axie, yes.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, Axie, really interesting card. It's one that when it was printed, like, we were sort of like, is this really going to be all that good? But we still see it seeing play. Great, obviously, as resetting your own units as well as purifying defenders. A very flexible card. Maybe not always the most spectacular, but it's like a golden version of a Pella. So how bad could it really be? Because Pella is one of my favorites for the longest time. And I just want to take a moment while we're watching this first round as this red haze comes through to talk about the development of these Reckless Flurry decks over the last few months. It's been really fascinating. We've seen Portal Fish Flappers. We've seen the Witcher decks that we saw at Masters #1. We've seen Discard Package. We've seen Maddock. And now Shaggy going one step further, and he's got the Discard Package and the Maddock in there. We've seen Great Swords. There's just been so many different variations of these Reckless Flurry decks, but still proving to be the more preferred version of Skellig. We've definitely seen some Melusine action as well, but certainly is the most popular way of playing Skellig. And I really do enjoy seeing the different takes on these decks, and excited to see Maddock back in the mix.
I mean, I've always been a fan of playing Skellige because I just love that kind of mid-range style, or the flexible style that it gives you. Like you were saying, Speci, you can line up, especially the flurry ability, with just about everything, right? You drop the greatsword down, you click the leader once, it feels a little bit safer. You drop a megascope on it. You just have so much flexibility and so many different things you can do with it. Especially if you're playing on ladder, let's say with a closed deck list, you can include things like Morkvarg, or maybe you have the Axie, or maybe you have the Hjalmar. There's, again, just so many different options you can throw together to build out a deck that best matches up against whatever you expect the meta to be. And I love that style. I love having that type of flexibility that you can use in any type of matchup. It makes you feel like you kind of always have a chance, and you're always have the opportunity to do some work.
And Shaggy applying pressure. Often it can be quite awkward to go first when you're on blue coin in this matchup because you lack a little bit of proactivity. And Wlastelin here is starting to get a little bit worried, I'm sure, because Shaggy commits a leader charge to just get 1 point ahead. It looked like the Sunset Wanderers was going to be forced from his hand, but Burner drawing more cards means that Shaggy still has Sunset Wanderers, but he has committed a leader charge. Gerd comes through. Gerd not available for Shaggy unless he wants to go Quen, which of course he'd prefer to use on a Bear Witcher. So Shaggy 10 points down, Sunset Wanderers ready to be summoned, but Wlastelin Sunset Wanderers is going to be just behind, and Axie versus Morkvarg on Sunset Wanderers. They're seeing no other real value in this one. Okay, Axie you can use in your own cards, but they definitely both have answers for each other's Sunset Wanderers as the totem comes down for Shaggy, which doesn't get him ahead, but here comes Sunset Wanderers to just make up those extra points and preserve another leader charge for Shaggy.
So that's something else that I think has been so interesting with Sunset Wanderers, right? We saw it come out, we saw it get nerfed, we saw it go back and forth. The beauty of it is, you know, if you're looking at your opponent's hand, and in this case, Shaggy sees that, hey, I'm going to have to commit my Wanderers here. But I've seen Wlastelin's hand. I know that the Wanderers are on the edge. So unless he draws some additional cards, his Wanderers are going to come out as well, and then I can answer them. So when you're playing in a mirror like this, it's so important to know where your cards are, but also being able to spot where your opponents are and knowing what direction they're going. So, hey, Shaggy feels a little bit bad about spending Wanderers in round 1, but I can stay ahead by doing this, knowing that my opponents come out and I have the answer for it in Morkvarg in my hand as well.
Yeah, and Morkvarg is going to play for 1 point more than Axie if used on Sunset Wanderers. At least, you know, trading for the Sunset Wanderers. The Sunset Wanderers might have been different sizes, but you sort of trade 1 point up because, you know, Axie's just going to put the Sunset Wanderers to 1 point. Morkvarg kills it. But Axie does have one little bit of armor, but more importantly, you can use it on your own side of the board. So Wlastelin not as forced to commit his Axie here, because he could use it to reset a Bear Witcher, for example, if he chooses to later on. And for the moment, just decides to use a Gutting Slash for 6 points. And yeah, this Skirm looking a little bit awkward in Wlastelin's hand with no discard ready for it.
This Coral, a little bit of a risk here. Feels pretty good based on what was drawn. Because drawing another high gold card could have been problematic.
Definitely.
But that's what gets him ahead. And that's all he's looking for here, because Axie can come down. But yeah, that Skirmisher is going to be a straight up brick here.
And Shaggy just applying so much pressure from this red coin with his Madoc, with his Sunset Wanderers. He had a lot of the answers. Wlastelin had Gerd. He did commit that one single leader charge at one point just to make sure that Wlastelin couldn't pass and lock him into the round. And Wlastelin is just in a little bit of an awkward spot now with just a Skirm in hand. Again, Shaggy masterfully staying 1 point ahead. The good news for Wlastelin is that this Skirm, while he's going to lose on even, will trade for a Quen, which is arguably the best card left in Shaggy's deck.
And that's, you know, I'm watching this game and I'm thinking back to what we just saw with the Syndicate Scoia'tael matchup, where Syndicate committed so much early in the game that it was somewhat problematic for them to come back and win later on in round 3. And looking at Shaggy's Reckless Flurry list, you know, the top half of that deck is gone now. Wanderers has been played. Okay, you still have Heatwave. No Totem, no Morkvarg, no Hjalmar. Quen, if is played here, would pretty much be it. Otherwise, you've got nothing apart from like a Heron, Kaduk, and then like Berna are your next top gold cards. So Shaggy could win here on even, but it's at what cost? That is the question.
And Wlastelin putting pedal to the metal, saying losing on even is not an option here. He hopes that there is a card in the hand of Shaggy that's not going to do it, but Shaggy does have the Quen. He slams down this Bear Witcher, which of course the shield is going to break and tank the damage. No leader charge necessary for Shaggy.
Point.
Wow.
1 point.
And chat seeming a little bit surprised by Wlastelin's decision to commit the leader, but basically what he's saying there is, if I lose this round on even, I lose the game. And that is why he's really gone for it, and Shaggy is looking in such a strong position here. Is he about to complete the 3-0 of Dreams Christo and book his place into Gwent Open number 4?
That's an excellent question. Again, I wonder, though, drawn, I mean, look at how few cards are left in Shaggy's deck. You've got 6 cards left. So that means you're getting access to pretty much everything you need. You're going to get to see all of your cards. You're going to feel pretty good about it, even though there aren't a ton of gold cards left. The advantage, again, is looking at his hand right now. You've got a bomb, you've got a Heatwave. You can avoid playing units for a little while to make things like your opponent's Heatwave or your opponent's Quen just a little bit more awkward. Though I have to admit, drawing the Morkvarg and the Skirmisher does not feel all that great.
Yeah, and especially with these bombs, this is where Madoc is just coming into his own, right? Obviously, was on the red side of the coin, which definitely helped the Madoc out. But even in this position here, where you're forcing your opponent to go first, you just don't have many proactive options in Skellige. You have Totem, you have maybe like some discards, but apart from that, even this Coral is just losing some value, and Shaggy is just going to continue, I would imagine, to use the value of non-interactivity, using these bombs, and okay, Madoc comes out on the board, but look, Madoc's going to come back later, so damaging Madoc is not really doing too much.
Exactly, and I mean, Coral at this point, there's no other discard. I don't know if Shaggy knows that for sure based on what has been played, but yeah, like you said, drop a bomb, no problem. Madoc comes out, you click a Madoc, even use a leader ability if you want to clean up Coral, for example. You can play your bear. If your bear does damage to Madoc, you click it after, so you don't really mind. A lot of flexibility on Shaggy's side to stay pretty unitless. It's just going to be a question of if Shaggy can keep up in points. Quen's going to go, for example, and pull, something with a shield on it, whether that is a Bear Witcher or not. Junod may or may not find a target, likely will because of the Bear Witchers coming down off of the Heron. So it's going to come down to sequencing here and expecting these players to do their best to, yeah, there you go. You can remove Madoc completely, and that will solve that problem for just a little while, though, until that bomb comes back out.
And again, just to touch on these leader charges from Wlastelin here, look, imagine he didn't use those leader charges and he still lost the round, right? These leader charges that he could have saved in round one, what are they doing here? Well, the answer is absolutely nothing, because he knew this game plan from Shaggy. A lot of his cards, like Heatwave, like Junod, rely on that damage. So, in fact, these leader charges would really just be playing for next to 0 points. So, definitely see why he committed them in round one there.
At this point, you have to Heatwave, and then Shaggy comes down, drops the bear. Junod comes down and does nothing, and then you feel pretty darn good. This looks like this is going to be enough to punch Shaggy's ticket to Gwent Open number 4.
And Shaggy winning those first 2 games just let him choose this matchup. He picked this Skellige deck. I'm a little bit surprised, honestly, by Wlastelin queuing his Skellige deck, thinking about it on red coin against it. You know, he had the option of queuing it from Shaggy's position going on red, and it just looked like a really horrible situation for him to be in this matchup. So I think Wlastelin gets his queue order slightly wrong here, but Shaggy is in Gwent Open number 4. His dreams of Masters at the end of the year very much still alive.